welcome back to a brand new episode of the MMA Beat. It is Thursday, October 13th, 2016. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani, back inside our New York City studio, back once again with the A-Team. And your eyes are not lying to you, my friends. How about this?
Natitude.
Natitude. Unbelievable.
Natitude,
Can't wait to blow my nose on that red. And I got a lot of stuff up here.
I can hear it. I can hear it.
There he is, Luke Thomas. Yes, it is, in fact, Luke Thomas switching it up for us, supporting his hometown Nats.
Well, I'm just responding to our many fashion consultants in the comments.
You look great.
Thank you.
Never looked better. Of course, he is of MMAfighting.com and SiriusXM. That is the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall. And of course, that is Jeff Wagenheim of the Washington Post. Chuck Mindenhall of MMAfighting.com. I don't mean to take that away from you.
Yeah, don't forget. I've never
right.
heard of him.
Yes. All right, guys, much to discuss. The big news yesterday, of course, Ronda Rousey is back. UFC President Dana White announcing on FS1 that she is returning December 30th, a Friday, UFC 207 against Amanda Nunes. She'll be fighting for the UFC Women's Bantamweight title. Is this the right call?
Ooh, geez, man. It's kind of funny. Like I'm not personally overly offended by it. I wouldn't have been offended if they've given her a different one, to be honest, because I spoke to Brett Okamoto of ESPN. I thought he made a really good point. He was like, we don't really know which of these fights is going to be her last one, win or lose. Even if she goes in there and wins the title, who's to say she won't walk away? Perhaps that would be unlikely, but it just feels like trying to speculate about her longevity is not that easy to do. So I can understand if that's the case about giving it to her. Obviously, you can look back at her resume of dominance and give that the reason. But Juliana Pena is not as deserving as, let's say, Jose Aldo or even Khabib Nurmagomedov, to be honest. But I can see why she'd be pissed. It's like you're getting a title shot after an absence that was preceded by you getting smoked. At least I've been winning. Now, the win over Kat Zingano was not necessarily all that dominant, but it was a win.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I can see why she'd be upset. So, it's not the wrong call. Doesn't offend me, but I can see how there would be some different viewpoints about this one.
I think it's a fitting fight, given 2016. It happens at the very end of 2016, where we've seen a lot of this sort of rational, how they've figured these who should match who in these fights. She probably doesn't deserve it in the sense of, there are other contenders right there. But then you look at, what she's done for the sport. And I always think back to this, it's like if Conor McGregor is getting, some of calling his shots at any level, well, Ronda Rousey is going to get the same star treatment in that same sense. And so in my mind, it's like, I guess I never considered that she wouldn't get a title shot as soon as she came back. We just assumed early on, as I was going forward, that it was going to come against Holly Holm.
Say it a lot.
Yeah. I think originally
he's
we all
been pretty
thought it was gonna be
consistent,
Holly Holm.
right? I mean, he has said, yeah.
And what she's done, though, I mean, when generally what she's done, all these ladies are fighting in the UFC because of Ronda Rousey, right? So I feel like if you're going to give Conor that type of treatment, Ronda Rousey just makes sense.
You said what she's done for the sport, but let's just say what she's done as an athlete. I think that, we forget. We think back to her getting knocked out by Holly Holm, but preceding that, it wasn't that she was just winning. She was just crushing people. She was defending her belt numerous times. I mean, she was a champion who was deserving of. She's one of those people who's deserving of an immediate rematch. We always weigh that, when a champion loses. And, like when Rockhold lost to Bisping, well, should he have got a rematch? Well, he never defended his belt once. You can name several other people who've never defended their belt once. Miesha Tate, Holly Holm, for example. Do they deserve rematches? Not really. They didn't defend their belt once. Ronda Rousey did. Now, the thing that mixes it up is that she didn't get the rematch against the woman who beat her because she had her long absence. But I think you have to judge UFC matchmaking on a curve anyway, because based upon the way that things have been going. I mean, the fight we saw last weekend turned out to be a fun fight to watch, but as a title fight, was the number 13 or 14 middleweight deserving of getting a shot at the belt? I think Ronda Rousey is certainly, by any measurement that I can come up with, is deserving of getting that shot. Juliana Pena deserves to be pissed off too, but that's just the breaks.
Nunes as well isn't going to, it's not going to carry an event like that. That's one place where the turnover in that particular division has kind of hurt, because you've had one to the next to the next. There's just no context beyond that. Like it doesn't have enough.
Real quickly. Yeah. And I don't know to what extent this is even relevant, but never discount the possibility that maybe giving her a title shot was necessary to get her to come back out of sabbatical or semi-retirement, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, let me ask you guys this from a business perspective. Had they done Pena Nunes as the title fight, but on the same card, Ronda Rousey versus either Miesha Tate or Holly Holm, or let's just say they get crazy and Chris Cyborg. To the casual sports fan who they're really trying to attract by getting Ronda back and by, announcing this and making a big deal out of it, does the belt really mean anything to them? So what I'm getting at is they know who Holly is, obviously. They know who Miesha is because of, what Holly and Miesha did at 196. Would it have been a bigger deal if they booked Ronda in a non-title fight against, opponent X who's known to the casual fan, as opposed to putting her in this title fight against someone who isn't really known to the casual fans? You get two for the price of one. You make Pena happy by giving her the title fight, and you put Ronda in there, even in the main event. Who cares, really? Those rules are gone. You could put a non-title fight over a title fight against a Miesha or a Holly.
I wouldn't have been opposed to it. I don't think that's a bad idea at all. And look, she was heavily favored against Amanda Nunes, but there's still that. What Amanda Nunes possesses is something that Miesha Tate doesn't, which is the ability to really dramatically hurt you. You know what I mean? Well, Miesha Tate can do that too, but not. I think we can all agree Amanda Nunes is a bit of a barbarian relative to Miesha Tate. So there is some added risk, I think, there, which makes the bout in some ways actually more intriguing. But to your point, yeah, there were a couple of permutations they could have gotten here. I wonder how much of this was, and don't forget who she repped by. WMEIMG.
How fascinating is that, right?
So we don't know. Again, I don't want to speculate unfairly and say that was the reason why, but you can't divorce it from the situation.
It would have been fun. It would have been fun to see it, though, in one way, because that symbol meant something to Ronda Rousey. That's part of the reason she was who she was, just going around with that belt. And that belt really meant something to her. So for her not to be in a title fight, but on the same card as him, that would have made some entertainment for me, at least.
Well, the scenario you present, you present two different options. Holly Holm, that's the woman who knocked her out. That's a natural. That'd be really something else. Miesha Tate, I'm not really with Miesha Tate not wearing the belt. I'm not quite sure what the point would be to put her in with somebody who's beat her.
To the casual fans, they don't even know about Miesha Ronda 1.
But I think you can't just make just that for casual fans.
I'm just wondering.
That's the biggest audience the UFC has.
Yeah, but they're trying to make as much money as possible. So I'm wondering. Okay, let's just say Holly Holm. Holly Holm versus Ronda main event. Versus Ronda versus Amanda Nunes main event. The Holly Holm fight probably gets more pay-per-views, right?
Yeah.
Especially if it's the first one back. Part of that,
Yeah, of course.
I mean, Amanda Nunes is, and I hate to say this because she's the deserving champion, she's something of a prop here. She's the prop for the larger story of look at the narrative of redemption that we're going to push for Ronda Rousey, whether it's true or not. And so I kind of feel like Amanda Nunes, change her name to Jane Smith or whatever. That it's not necessarily all that relevant. The Holly Holm one. Do you really want to go into that first thing? It'd be monumental, but I think they want to milk it over a couple of them if they can.
Sure. Also, we can't really speculate without hearing from Ronda. She has done very little media since her loss, especially MMA media. So it's going to be interesting to see what she does say. Maybe the belt meant the world to her and she just had to get the belt. But it does take us back to the decision of booking Amanda Nunes versus Miesha Tate, because had they done the rematch, Holly Holm versus Miesha Tate at 200, they'd be now looking at either Holly Ronda 2 for the belt or Miesha Ronda 3.
That was the fork in the narrative.
Right?
It really was. I mean, that's the whole reason we're even having this discussion, is because Amanda Nunes came in at some point and wrecked all narratives that were in play beforehand, because you really couldn't have gone wrong with any of those. But Amanda Nunes just doesn't have any, there's no blood, there's no context there. And with the belt changing hands as many times as it has, it just takes away from it. So I agree with you. I mean, that's how I view it as well, that she's a prop for Ronda Rousey's return at this point. Whereas it was, no matter if it was Tate, they could have done Cyborg, like you mentioned, if it was Tate or Holm. You've got some kind of bad blood that's going to feed into that would make it extra huge, you know what I mean? But I still think Ronda, though, in general, coming back is enough to be a huge fight.
Yeah, your options were Ronda Rousey comes back against the woman who knocked her out, or Ronda Rousey comes back against the belt holder. And the name of the belt holder is not really important. It's to get back the belt that she lost. And so it was really it's a redemption tour. That's why I think that the Miesha Tate one wouldn't make no sense, because there's no angle of redemption with Miesha Tate. Miesha Tate, she's beaten twice, and there's no belt. There's nothing. What does she gain from Miesha Tate? Nothing, really.
The hard part is that a couple of the names we're mentioning have taken such steps back. Like Holm, for instance, is nowhere near the conversation anymore. Like, well,
I think she is, though.
Yeah. Well, it depends, I guess.
With Rousey gone, no, she's nowhere near. With Rousey now back,
well, that's true.
Wins,
that is her. You're right. It's her springboard back. But right now, Holm still is going to have to go fight somebody else. You couldn't just put her in a position to fight her I don't think. I mean, I don't think that they would do that.
Yeah, if Rousey wins the title, how do you give home a title shot?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the
Also,
other.
you said something real quick I think is kind of interesting. You were like, she hasn't spoken to MMA media. I think this build-up is going to be really interesting to see. How much does she talk to us? I think the less she talks to us, the more of a red flag that is. Because it's easy to go on big-time radio shows or big-time TV shows that are really going to tiptoe around. They're going to secure the interview by guaranteeing they tiptoe around those questions. We don't have those problems or those luxuries. To the extent she sits there and I don't intend on attacking her, but to the extent she faces us and the proverbial firing squad, I think that will tell you a lot about where she is up there, and I'm curious to see how that plays out.
I think Ellen is a hard hitter when it comes to interview.
Look, she's hard-hitting when it comes to dance critiques.
Are you guys surprised that the last time Ronda Rousey fought, prior to this one, was 193 in Melbourne? We all remember she shows up on Good Morning America and makes the announcement herself and essentially has to sell the world, or at least North America, on who Holly Holm is. She was like, this girl's tough, trust me, this is going to be a great fight.
She was right.
That's right. So are you surprised that, the last time she makes an announcement or they make an announcement, it's her on Good Morning America. This time it's Dana on Colin Cowherd. Does that say anything about...
Moving on up.
No, it's good. She needs to dial back how much media she does. My only consideration is to what extent is the balance national, non-indigenous MMA media versus indigenous MMA media who knows all of her secrets and all of her tricks. That to me is the issue.
Yeah, and I also think, like you were mentioning, Colin, on that particular interview, Dana was basically saying that it's not there's no psychological issue here, and I just think that that's. I mean, how can it not be a psychological issue? I mean, right. you heard her, like you were talking about with Ellen and these things, where she says that she has suicidal moments in these things.
Yes.
This is psychological. I mean, this whole thing is psychological going all the way back. To me, that's half the drama of this fight, regardless who she's fighting, is what form does Ronda Rousey appear in December. I mean, that to me is like pretty much the extent of the drama at this point.
Yeah, and back in the past when she was going on Good Morning America, she was expanding. She was expanding her base. She was becoming more and more and more of a star, transcending the MMA world. And now it's like she's trying to find her way back into it, into the little world that she used to inhabit.
And let's be very clear here. I don't think any of us disagree with the notion that this is huge for the sport. This is very important for the UFC. It's great to have Ronda Rousey back.
Super awesome.
But I do think, to a degree, it is our job to sort of weed through the nonsense. And I bring that up because I want to ask you guys this question. Dana White said yesterday, and he has said multiple times over the last few weeks, that unequivocally, Ronda Rousey is not only the biggest star in the UFC in sport today, but of all time. Is that accurate?
Wait, in sport?
No, of all time in MMA.
It's like she's bigger than Muhammad Ali? I don't think so. Here's my point about this. If someone wants to say Conor McGregor is a bigger star, I certainly would not argue with it. I think definitely that's true at the box office. I don't know that box office draw is tantamount to being the biggest celebrity. So if you talk, for example, and what would that even mean? If you talk to, I had a MMA fan from Europe write me yesterday, and he was like, how big is Ronda Rousey? Because I can tell you here, definitely she's popular, but Conor's bigger, which to me makes all the sense in the world. And here I would say it's a little bit different. Now her absence sort of has really amplified Conor, and all of his wins have too. But to me, you can't forget all the demos she reached into that I'm not even sure Conor could reach into.
Sure.
He might get more of the same, and that size audience is bigger. She gets more of a lot different. And you really can't...
Does that audience buy pay-per-views, though?
Maybe just for her. I don't know how lasting it is, but we're asking just about what kind of presence she brings. It is a little bit different. People do sit up and talk about her in ways that they may not necessarily. Now, let's be clear, it's neck and neck. The only thing I would say for her achievements, too, though, remember, Australia and Brazil, each over $1 million on pay-per-view buys, literally unprecedented. We just saw Michael Bisping and Dan Henderson. If that thing cracks 300,000, I'll be surprised.
Right. You bring up pay-per-views. You challenge that by saying, well, does she bring pay-per-views? That's about being a draw. That's about.
Isn't that the name of the game, though?
Well, that's part of one element of being a star is to be the biggest draw. And on Planet MMA, McGregor is probably bigger than Ronda Rousey on that planet. But in the bigger universe, the bigger sports world, it's not even close.
Okay,
Ronda Rousey is a huge crossover star. There are people out there who do not know who Conor McGregor is. If they know that there's some crazy Irish guy, that there are people out there who are, even in the sports world, who are not that conversant in Conor McGregor. Everybody in the sports world and a lot of people beyond know about Ronda Rousey. It's just the way it is.
I do think that the gap is closed. Like last year, I know we had a similar discussion about this, and at the time it would have been, well, Rousey is obviously the bigger star when it really comes down to it. But that gap is obviously closed this year because Ronda has been out of the spotlight, and McGregor is actually some of those markers where you're like, oh, Beyonce is out and doing this stuff and talking about Rousey and do nothing, bitch, and all this stuff that was going on at the time, which. Everything she did was viral, but I feel like almost at this point, McGregor has a certain appeal the same way. You see him showing up in those random ways that are so cross-culture and so big into that cross-culture that I think he's closed that gap a little bit.
Also, I would argue that to an extent, McGregor has prevented himself from being a bigger star. Remember, he was going to be in that Vin Diesel movie and said, no, I need to get back to my craft. It seemed to me like Rousey, because he was like, well, I'm armbarring these ladies in 15 nanoseconds. Let me just take all these different acting and whatever else opportunities. McGregor has been like, I'm not going to do that. So maybe McGregor could be even bigger than he is if he went that path, but he has redoubled his efforts.
It would have been interesting if that opportunity came along before he had lost to Diaz. And if he was just smoking people.
I think he's a bigger star. Now, I'm pulling out my phone here, guys, and I'm not trying to be rude.
You did that last week, too.
No, but this is all about live television and just being on the ball. I looked at it late last night, but I wanted to check on it today. Ronda Rousey's tweet sort of announcing her return, and she doesn't tweet all that often, and who knows how much you can really put stock into this stuff. Her tweet saying, fear the return, this is her initial tweet saying, I am back, has 13,000 likes and 8,000 or so, closer to 9,000 retweets, right?
Yeah. Conor's was like, what, 60,000 or something?
So let's just look at Conor's tweet from Monday saying that he gets paid more than the bums at the NAC.
Right.
Conor's tweet on Monday saying, I get fined more than these bums get paid, has 107,000 likes, 56,000 retweets. Yeah. I mean, that is quadruple.
He's right in there, though,
but he's surfing right now. She hasn't been in the pool.
And he's also
this is her return. If there's ever going to be
that's his medium, though. That social media, that's where he swims.
Yeah, he's also
that's
really
not her
good at
thing. I mean, she's reaching out. She's doing the movies, doing other things. It's a different animal. I mean, that's his world. I think that the social media stuff is his world.
I just wonder if saying this is another sort of.
He is a bigger guy in terms of being an attraction at the show. I don't think you can argue that.
Isn't that what it's all about?
She is a bigger cultural curiosity, which is a different consideration. When you say star is a very imprecise term.
What I've always said is that she can open doors that the UFC never dreamed of opening. Good Morning America, Ellen, etc. But at the end of the day, what does that translate into? Does it translate into a few magazine covers, things like that? Like, my wife thinks Ronda Rousey's cool, but is she putting down $60 if she's at home alone on December 30th to watch the fight? I highly doubt it. So at the end of the day, what does that all mean if it doesn't translate into dollars?
Yeah, but if you're talking about Q rating, to what extent is she a popular attraction that people know of, right? How big of a figure are you? Man, I mean, I'm not saying McGregor wouldn't be one. I am not saying it, but if he's one, she's 1B. You know what I mean?
In 2016 alone, Conor McGregor has 2 of the highest selling pay-per-views of all time.
Right. Dude, he's a huge star.
I don't think you can
I don't even think it's a debate at this point.
You can't debate, you can't dispute his numbers. His numbers speak for themselves. And so if you're questioning who is the biggest draw in MMA, there's only one answer.
No argument.
But I think that when you talk about stardom, it is a little more nebulous. There's a lot of different ways in which you can interpret it, and a lot of it has to do with just some person you're walking down the street in Manhattan, and you just start stopping people and asking, hey, did you see what Conor McGregor did?
I wonder.
I would surmise that more people would know who Ronda Rousey is than know who Conor McGregor is. That doesn't make McGregor less of anything. He's still the biggest selling guy in the business.
It's not exact, but you look at almost how it was handled when they lost. Like, how did it seem more devastating? Like these things, and when she lost, it felt almost cataclysmic for the sport.
Yeah.
Like it almost for a minute there felt like, oh man. I remember reporters saying like, well, I hope I have a job tomorrow. That sort of stuff. I mean, it got that crazy. Just what she meant to the galvanizing the sport and putting it back into that, and actually elevating it really, because like you were mentioning, it's just there were so many elements that brought her into it. So and then maybe it's though because how she lost and she came first, but when McGregor lost, I didn't feel like that at all. I felt like,
but imagine that had been different.
Yeah.
Imagine that Rousey had treated her loss like McGregor treated his, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And again, also, McGregor is also partly an entertainer, which is why the social media stuff he's so good at. And so it's a bit of an exaggerated thing. But I mean, if she was still out there doing this and he had been gone, and then the only interviews you saw were on national TV in Ireland where he was crying about being submitted, there would be damage to his brand, right? She got damaged by that. Coming back from LAX and covering up her face, saying she couldn't bite into an apple, like that hurt her big time. So she has some rebuilding to do.
Sure.
But I wonder at her peak versus his peak, I still think he's the bigger box office attraction. I still wonder though about her, just the uniqueness of her story. It's just hard to overlook.
Absolutely. And again, I'm not trying to take anything away from her, but I do feel when I think of stars and who's the bigger celebrity in a combat sport, I think of who's the draw. Who's the one that's going to sell tickets and who's the one that's going to sell pay-per-views. And I think Conor has proven that he'll do that way more than anyone. And also, look, the way in my opinion, he became a bigger star after the Nate Diaz loss because he handled the loss with such grace.
Like a champ.
I mean, we've said this before, but he put out the blueprint. Like, if you want to teach your kid how to handle defeat, embarrassment, like people were pointing at him, laughing, haha, you got smoked by a top 10 lightweight. And he just showed up there and he said, I'll be back.
Showed up there with a baller-ass suit and answered every single question.
Right.
He didn't show up there like Cam Newton and then just rolled out when he didn't like it. And then after that, turned down the XXX thing to get back to his craft. I really feel like that elevated him.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of I forgot about Dre going on with I forgot about Rousey. A lot of people forgot about her. We're going to see what happens when she gets back. If she's truly damaged permanently, well, then forget about it. But if she can rebuild, we'll see.
I think it will be a big deal. How big of a deal do you think it will be? Like, is this bigger than Conor Nate 2? And also, I don't know how much the Friday thing comes into play. The last time they did a Friday pay-per-view was UFC 141, Lesnar Overeem, because it was the same thing where they didn't want to do a New Year's Eve Saturday show. So I don't know how much that comes into play. I think she's a big enough star where people will just watch her whenever she's fighting. But is this going to be a big deal? And let's say, they have Kane and Verdum.
Yeah.
Dana White is hinting that Dominic Cruz is going to be on the card, and that's nice as well. But it's all about Ronda.
On wood.
Yeah, that's right. It's all about Ronda. So,
of course. I still think it's going to be big. That's what I was saying a little bit ago. I still think that just her comeback is going to be big. I think that there are so many, like you were saying, the casual or the bigger media outlets will get behind it because they know Ronda Rousey. I think it's going to be the same sort of build-up. I think the UFC will know how to do that. It'll be interesting to see how much she wants to dial back on her lead-up because if you remember in Melbourne, she was basically saying, I'm exhausted, I'm tired of this, I'm taking a break after this, I'll come back at UFC 200. It was like the type of person who was just fed up with her station for a little bit too. And so you're like, what part of that, in what form does she return even on that level? Is she going to want to promote it throughout all the places that UFC wants her to?
Does she have to promote it?
I don't know. Yeah, to an extent, I think, right? Okay. Because I do really believe that things move so fast in the fight game, even casually. Because like we were saying, McGregor steps in and he's just been this guy. But she's been gone long enough, I think. She still has the name, but she's been gone long enough where it's just not the hottest flame right now. So I think she's going to have to a little bit. She's going to have to take, in my mind, she's going to have to do the same thing she was doing before. But maybe, like you were saying, I don't know if she'll talk to MMA media as much as just kind of hitting the bigger places and getting out there what she wants.
Either promote it or be that quiet storm that rises from the horizon, because there's something about that. There's something about the mystery of what Ronda Rousey still possesses, and so of course it's going to be a big deal. I don't think it's going to be, in terms of your focus on the money and the box office. It's not going to get the kind of pay-per-views that a McGregor fight. I just don't think that she can sell fights the way that McGregor can. So I don't think that's going to surpass that. But it's a big deal.
Because you think that they'd want to build on how does she return? The promos like
there's a story.
But will they? That's the question.
Also, McGregor seeks out the biggest fight possible. This is, I guess, one of the biggest fights possible, given that there's a title on the line. But in terms of the foil there at Amanda Nunes, this is not one of the biggest. Like if Rousey could pick who's the biggest fight I could make, it wouldn't necessarily be Amanda Nunes. And so, McGregor hit lightning or not. McGregor is the architect of his own success, but I really feel like it was a fortuitous thing that he got the Diaz fight and then they lost and they built it up and then the whole UFC 200 thing happened. He became this huge media story. He became bigger in that whole process as a consequence. And I feel like if Rousey had kept competing, I don't know that she couldn't pass it, but I'm just not ready to bury her yet.
Let's say that she does go in there and beat Amanda Nunes and she looks like she did in her vintage form, just like goes right through her. then you get to the point like, is she back? Are we back to where we were with Ronda Rousey? And if you were to do the Cyborg fight, does that become the biggest?
Okay, well, this is
fight of all
my
time,
this is my
you know?
question too, because yesterday Dana said it's going to definitely happen, but he never said the word next. He never said after.
People
It was
kept
just
getting like lost in that.
Yeah. So do you believe that it's going to happen? I mean, did we learn anything new about the state of that fight? Then because no one asked them.
Yeah.
Well, what weight is it going to happen? Because this seems to be a big sticking
Until you hear
point.
Ronda Rousey say, I would fight her at 140 pounds or something along those lines, I feel like it's all we're just going to linger in this, like, probably not.
Well, first of all, Dana White said it, so you know that means it's going to happen because, if the words come out of his mouth, that's the gospel right there. But no, it seems to me that it's the opposite. It was almost like he was contradicting himself in a way because if Ronda Rousey goes out and immediately becomes the 135-pound champion again, what is she going to do? She's going to fight at 135 pounds.
Sure.
She's not Conor McGregor. She's not McGregor who's gonna seek bigger things. I don't think she's gonna go and try to step up.
She'll do it in Hollywood.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I don't think she's gonna go step up and fight fight Cyborg at 145 or even 140. I think that she's got some challenges. She would have challenges left right there at 135, and she would probably take those. So I think of the opposite. I would say if she wins this fight, I would say,
Decreases.
goodbye Cyborg.
I mean, we're living in the age where having contenders apparently doesn't matter anymore. Yeah, I completely agree with Jeff. Shevchenko's out there making noise. Obviously, we just talked about Juliana Pena. Kat Zingano could get a nice win. Misha Tate's on the 205 card. You never know what could happen with that. But I mean, who cares? Like, all of this is totally flexible, and none of it necessarily is binding. Like,
I shouldn't care when it's Cyborg and her. It's like, to me, if they were able to get that fight together, it just becomes.
I just thought it was super interesting that he never said next. He never said. He just said it's definitely happening, but based on what? Like
the only movement, we've talked about this before, the only movement on that is, well, one, now I guess Rousey is back to competition, but that he goes, it could happen at 140, whereas before it was like, has to be a
Did
top.
he say that?
Yeah, it could happen at 140. Yes, he did say that.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah,
I didn't hear anyone ask. Okay, what weight is this still a sticking point? Maybe I missed it.
I am pretty damn sure. No, not that they invoked Rousey, but that Cyborg would no longer have to be forced to go down to 135 to take big fights.
Sure, but in the past, from what I recall, Ronda said you have to come to 135.
Yeah, they dug up old
Because
tweets
I've
of
got
her.
the belt.
Yeah.
So
That was.
the belt is that's where she always would talk about, I've got the belt.
Sure.
And that's why I think if she didn't have the belt, if they just said, she's coming back, let's put her in against, maybe they put her in against somebody else and then build up a Cyborg
This is
fight.
one of those things where McGregor does change perception even more so, because here he is jumping up in weight classes and doing these big fights, which then makes Rousey look all the worse. Because he is a champion too, but it makes her look, if we're comparing them at all, like, well, why won't you go up and you really want the fight, right? Like, you want to make this big fight. Why wouldn't you do that?
And to your point about Dana White not saying that would be the next fight, he doesn't really need to. He just says it's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen, because then that kind of pushes aside all those questions that people want to put out. How come the biggest women's fight in history is not going to happen? Well, it is going to happen. He doesn't have to put a date on it. He just throws it out there just to stop the storm of questions.
What was the greatest was Cyborg's tweet, like, she could lose 100 times and I still want to fight her.
Sure.
It's like a come up.
Although it drives me nuts because it's not Cyborg tweeting, and I think she's doing such a disservice to herself by playing this game, because you speak to her, you speak to her in person, and she's a different person than her social media.
You know what? She went on that Speak For Yourself show, and she was really good.
She was fantastic. I thought it was very telling that the UFC never promoted her appearance. She did it herself, but it was on FS1. And hey, she's got a friend in Jason Whitlock. Holy moly, that guy is really cheerleading her on. Let me ask you guys one last thing about all this. If you're the UFC, do you put Cyborg on that card to put more pressure on this and put more of a spotlight on all this?
I mean, I would say yes, but I feel like the chances of that are so. They don't want to do anything that's going to hasten the exit of Ronda Rousey, and putting that kind of uncomfortable pressure on her. I mean, unless she went and outright requested it, which seems also unlikely.
Sure.
Yes, it'd be great. It seems deeply unlikely.
Wouldn't it be amazing if they had an all-women's main card, like you put Holly against someone, Pena, Shevchenko, Cyborg? It's not going to happen already. We know that Kane and Verdun, but I feel like they have enough players. Sorry.
I mean, I was going to say you could just have Cyborg at cage side, similar to Jose Aldo when McGregor was fighting, and then at the end, Ronda can like leap over the cage and
if she
demonically.
did that, she'd be back. If she
Okay,
didn't
but
throw the cage,
imagine Cyborg demolishes someone, and then the next fight is Ronda demolishing Amanda, and now you've got this large audience who know who Cyborg is. I think it would make a lot of sense, but I do agree with your sentiment. Okay, let's move along to Conor McGregor. On Monday, he received word that he is being fined $150,000 by the Nevada Athletic Commission and has to do 50 hours of community service for his part in the UFC 202 pre-fight press conference where he was throwing water bottles and Monster Energy cans, which has sometimes been omitted. And I know our colleague
sponsor.
Mark Ramundi mentioned Monster Energy 1,000 times that week in Las Vegas. Dana White saying yesterday as well that not only does he think it was too stiff of a penalty, but now Conor McGregor is saying, I don't want to fight in Nevada anymore. Did they make a colossal mistake here?
They are a colossal mistake. Did they make it? Did they wake up? Did they get in their cars? I mean, that's just who they are. So this to me was so interesting because it's kind of telling. Someone asked me like, I'm from Europe. I don't quite understand this whole athletic commission thing, and I explained it. I was like, look, think of it this way, right? If you are in the United States and you want to be able to drive on the streets, you have to get a learner's permit, if you're 16 or whatever, but a driver's license is what you need. You have to go to the DMV, provide appropriate documentation to verify your identity, take a knowledge test, take a driving test. In other words, there's a series of requirements that you have to satisfy before a government agency tasked with verifying that you have done enough to merit the privilege of being able to drive on the road. And of course, there are other requirements as well. That's what it's in charge of, and it's actually really, really good at doing that. Now, of course, they also impose fines and penalties, but you'll notice what the difference is for either that or you have to get a license to cut hair or be a contractor. It's not that you can't face steep penalties in the event of extreme circumstances. It's that all of those agencies tasked with giving citizenry licenses for different practices, they'll just snatch your license very quickly and offer some level of suspension, right? The commission won't do that. And they didn't do it for Floyd Mayweather for heinous crimes. This idea that we have to give him a fine proportional to his purse, they're only doing that because they don't have the balls to do the thing that other agencies tasked with similar kinds of responsibilities would, which is to take away his license, which I'm not advocating for. I'm just saying it's a phony show of force. It doesn't mean anything. I frankly don't think it'll deter him. As Dana White indicated, I think he's right. I mean, I'm sure McGregor will eventually make his way back to Vegas, but it definitely isn't a good look for them. And it's only done because they won't pull the trigger on the real thing that would actually deter them. They are cowards. They always have been. They always will be.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything you just said. I mean, they'd basically be shooting themselves in the foot, obviously, to do that. That's what makes his response to say, I don't want to fight in Vegas again, kind of the ultimate response, right? Because that's the only thing that kind of hurts the Vegas Athletic Commission, the Nevada Athletic Commission, say I don't want to go to you again then. You know what I'm saying?
Do you think they foresaw this? Because then they're really shooting themselves in the foot.
To watch their deliberations when they're doing it, probably not. I mean, I feel like they don't come.
They even talk to each other beforehand?
I don't know. That's where it gets really odd. I started. We joked a couple years ago, it's become like the hit show on Fight Pass. The NFC hearings, but they get stranger and stranger every time, and it's just the no rhyme or reason effect of what's going on there. I mean, I don't really feel like it's being things are reached logically. It's just they just kind of banter back and forth.
Logically, Pat Lundvall saying $300,000 fine.
Yeah.
I don't know this person. Maybe she is a totally great person in real life. That argument, not her, but that argument is deranged. That is a deranged thing to say.
It's a lifetime ban she was trying to give. You know what I mean? I feel like she's always the one who starts at the extreme. Yeah. We whittle down in this gray area that's just absurd, and that's where we settle. Just the absurdity instead of just extreme.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I was not watching this on Fight Pass, but I was following it on Twitter, and I saw somebody tweet out that the Attorney General had just proposed a $25,000 fine. And I'm like, okay, well, that's what they're going to. And then all of a sudden, then we're hearing about $300,000. And then we're hearing, it was just, I love Conor McGregor's response. I loved his response because, and he's not the first one who's, we had Henry Cejudo who did not want to fight in Nevada. And I think that fighters, Nick Diaz, don't fight in Nevada. They should Nate Diaz, don't fight in Nevada. Just refuse to take a fight in Nevada, and we'll see what happens. I mean, of course, none of those guys bring the same, same kind of sway that Conor McGregor does. So he's the one. But how much money would if UFC 205 were being held in Vegas, what would be the Nevada cut? It'd be a pretty damn good chunk of change, right?
Do you agree though that both, and we don't know what Nate got, by the way, because he was given a continuance. Do you guys agree that they deserved some kind of punishment?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
What would have been acceptable? Like
Well,
a 25,000?
Here's the thing, because there is no coherent basis by which they met out punishments, we're all kind of groping in the dark.
Yeah.
I think the Attorney General's suggestion is probably a pretty rational one. That is, by any measurement, a very $25,000. You can buy a new car with that kind of money. So it's a very healthy fine. I think you also said community service to some extent. Right. I don't remember quite what it was.
25.
And if they want to up it even a little bit more than that, that's fine. But are you 300? What? You know how many homes you can buy in rural America for that kind of money?
And what about the precedent, right? The precedent. What's the last example of something like this happening? It's DC and Jones brawling in the lobby.
Which is so worse.
Worse. There's people checking in right behind them. There's and DC got fined what, $9,000?
$9,000.
I mean,
They have this idea that like if we just keep the same proportion, like 10% of everyone's money, this is just where the money ends up. That just shows you how moronic the idea that proportionality is the way to solve this problem.
That was the other thing. They came up with. We hope you'll accept this idea of a fixed fee of $25,000. That's what they were trying to put out there, and it turns into a percentage of 5 or 10%. And see, this is where it gets all weird because you're like, okay, he makes $3 million. Well, the percentage that's going to hurt him a lot worse. But his audacity, it's like a paradox because his audacity, everything that he's done to this point is why he has that purse. It's like, he's punching somebody's arm during the, it's how he is. He's snatching a belt from Jose Aldo. This is who he is. Like, he's always done this. It doesn't excuse his behavior, but the fact that he rose to make $3 million is based on a lot of his behaviors and being like non-PC and just being able to know the fight game inside and out. And there's just a strange paradox in play that's like, let's hit him with a percentage of his purse. You know what I mean? It's bizarre to me. But there is no precedent. Like you said, it's like the $25,000, they could have bumped it to $50,000. It would have been like, well, okay, they're just doing a round number. It still would have been easier to understand. But it was just that they went into percentages. And then you get into like, well, the $3 million, you get into the whole thing.
We've been sitting here for 5 minutes trying to find some rationality underneath madness. Really. I mean, the way you started this was right on. I mean, this organization, this group. We could go through the number of different decisions that have been handed down by these guys. Nick Diaz brings a competent attorney in, and it backfires because the guy makes a competent. Smart case for his client. If somebody comes in and just bows down to the goddesses of the commission.
Didn't Conor kind of do that? And do you think that he should have?
He was respectful.
He was respectful, but then he goes on Twitter and says, I make more than they get. I get fined more than they get paid. What would have happened if he would have done that?
What do you mean?
If he would have said that to them? You guys are crazy. 150? Are you guys
300
nuts?
it would have been 300.
Pat Lundvall,
Do you kind of wish if he had no interest in ever fighting in Nevada again, do you kind of wish that he said that to them?
Yeah. I mean,
because what's 300
yes,
to
but
him?
I'm not the one. Look, my dad's divorce from my mother didn't cost $300,000. Think about that for a second. So I could understand if he'd be upset, but we're living in an age where, and I don't know what the solution is. This is different from like, the fighters getting together to collectively act against the UFC. Against the commission, I don't know what they can do. So besides genuflection, so you can say, would I have liked to have seen that kind of candor? Sure, but I don't know what kind of cost.
I always think back to, was it Vitor Belfort, right, who was reading his letter and he's choking up and everything, and they're like, okay, whatever, they said that whatever it was at the time, and they're like, they announced his fight in Las Vegas right afterward. Just those types of things, and you're like,
dude, they love the rub and tug.
Yeah.
Can I tell you my big takeaway? My big takeaway after seeing that whole scene unfold in front of our eyes, the circus once again.
That was such a vile comparison. Sorry about that.
But apt somehow.
And it's funny because it has been quite a while since we had the NAC circus. It seemed like around this time last year, it was like every single week they were doing something to sort of draw our ire. But to me, my big takeaway from Monday was, man, Jon Jones is screwed.
Oh, they're gonna rip
Jon
him over
Jones
the
is
coals.
screwed. They are back, and they are coming after Jon Jones.
I think Jon Jones already deleted the video where he's like, "I'll be back soon." If he hasn't, if I were you, I would delete it because again, I made this point about USADA. I think it's a little bit of overreach, but who could argue they're not scientifically literate by and large, especially relative to the Nevada Athletic Commission?
Yeah.
You know, Pat Lundvall. I mean, the mouth breather who sits there at K. Watch any UFC event and watch Pat Lundvall breathing exclusively through her mouth. Okay, sitting there cage.
Why is that an insult, by the way?
Because that's what donks do. That's what donks who drive through flyover states eating Stuckey's ice cream bars do.
I
Okay.
have no idea what you're talking about now.
Okay.
Stuckey's, baby.
I mean, nothing.
What is Stuckey's? I've never heard of Stuckey's.
Google Stuckey's. Okay. Anyway, long story short.
You know Stuckey's?
I don't know. What
No,
Stuckey's.
keep going.
You don't know what
Okay.
Stuckey's is?
No,
Stuckey's is this chain of roads, these places you can
Pecan
get.
roll, baby.
The pecan roll with all the goo in the middle. Hey man, you want to go fishing? Let's go to Live Bait Tackle Shop. Pat Lundvall's down there breathing through her mouth. That's what you get.
Okay.
I don't know where I forgot what we were talking about.
Keep it going, man. Keep it going. Come on.
Well, no, because I said that Jon Jones is in trouble.
Oh, he's in big trouble.
And
So don't fight in Vegas. Don't fight in.
well, no, but he's going to get, if they give him a 2-year suspension, right? The UFC is going to have to respect that and not book him for 2 years.
Well, okay. So
Because
how
all the
about
other commissions respect that.
So how about this? We sit here and talk about what a joke this commission is. Dana White essentially, without saying they're a
Yeah.
joke, essentially said that. Fighters say that. How about some other commissions step up?
Yeah.
How about the brand new New York commission? You know,
Oh,
what
they're
if they
a
got handed down a suspension to McGregor on Monday, and New York has this big fight? What if New York just said, gave him a nice little Bronx salute out to Vegas and said, you know what, we're going to bring the big fights to the Garden from now on. You guys, you guys are the thing of the past. I mean, wouldn't that would be great? Then you bring Jon Jones down here. You bring McGregor down here.
I'd
Yeah,
love
man.
to see the ABC or Andy Foster, who I feel has sort of emerged as maybe the face of commissioners and commissions in the United States. And he has, to a certain degree, in unofficial ways, but what drives me nuts are these arbitrary rules that they just come up with on the spot. There's no guidelines. You remember when they came out with those punishments, and they don't stick to that.
Corruption.
It's frustrating, but you know what? Good for Conor McGregor, who is really one of the very few people in the sport who can say, you know what, screw you guys. It'd be nice to now see other people say, you know what, I'm not going to fight there, even if I'm a small.
Such smug,
Yeah.
petty power stuff when you watch them. I mean, you're just watching them deliberate. And, why don't we do this? It's
That's
like
why.
watching.
Remember last year I
spoiled
said they
children.
should stop televising these things because
Yeah.
they're turning them into
Yeah.
stars and feeding the ego. They should just stop televising them.
Biggest stars in MMA right there. Forget McGregor. Forget Rousey. Pat Lundvall.
They still want their pound of flesh. There's still a lot of hysteria going on about how much can we make fighters bend, right? There's a lot of that fever. There's fever swamps now filled with people who we are in an age where we need to make fighters bend to us, and they are certainly not. They're not alone in that. I mean, a lot of people are like that, including a lot of fans, to be honest. So I just think it's also part of the current climate that's going around.
Yeah, and let's be real. $150,000 fine is a spit in the bucket for Conor McGregor, but what's right is right, and that was not right. Okay, let's move along to Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy, the now former.
Finally, a positive one.
Yes, former Dallas Cowboy. And I heard from a lot of Dallas Cowboys fans. It was so interesting when I tweeted out this story, how many people.
Why were you listening to Dallas Cowboys fans?
No, but what was fascinating about it, the amount of people.
Did you de-louse them first?
The amount of people who
I think the Nevada
commented.
Commission is higher on the totem pole than the Dallas Cowboy fans.
I'm not privy to that world, but the amount of people who commented on the story who weren't following me. So it was interesting how the football fans got all up in arms about this, but a lot of the Cowboys fans were upset that the headline was former Dallas Cowboys player Greg Hardy, because he played for the Panthers for 5 years. Why are you pinning it?
I was in the city of Carolina, in Charlotte, right after he was no longer there, and I mean it was like a celebration that he was gone. And he's his caliber.
They deactivated
I know.
him and just sent
So
him
for
on
those
down.
that don't know, he played for the Carolina Panthers for
They
5 seasons.
They drafted him.
Drafted him, then went on to play for the Cowboys for 1 season. But the notable thing about Greg Hardy, above, of course, his Pro Bowl season in 2013, 15 sacks, all that stuff, is accused of domestic violence, had an ugly incident with a ex-girlfriend, missed 15 games, and I think
technically convicted, and then it was he appealed it, and then the accuser didn't show, and then he eventually had it expunged.
Okay.
But he was sentenced to probation and convicted.
missed 15 games in 2014, was suspended for 10 games in 15, but then it was reduced to 4 games.
Right.
recently arrested for cocaine possession, and is out of the league. This was, by all,
No contrition.
Right, and all
nothing like that.
by all accounts, a talented player, but many, many, many demons off the field.
And on the field too, he was shoving coaches on the sidelines.
So anyhow, getting to my point, the team that is surrounding him right now tells me earlier this week that he is training to become an MMA fighter. He's been doing this for several months. He has no extensive background in mixed martial arts, but this is something that he is interested in doing and is focused on doing. Now, he's not trying to sign with the UFC at this juncture. The UFC is not saying that they're signing him, but he's just saying, I want to be an MMA fighter at this point. And of course, this was a hot topic on all the hot topic, hot take shows. How do you guys feel about it? Let's just go there first.
Checking Scott Coker's Twitter feed, same way he's going to be, hey, I'm with my pal.
Is that what you're expecting?
No. I have no idea, honestly.
How do you feel about this?
I mean, I know that you knew about this a little bit was happening because I know I was talking to you behind the scenes, but I mean, my feeling is just like, wow, what a polarizing guy to make this. It's a big time polarizing guy to come over to the sport, and how will that play out? And I feel like that's basically where we're at. I wasn't sure. I didn't think he'd be embraced, and he certainly hasn't been, but you do get a lot of people too who are like, well, why shouldn't he be? There's plenty of people in MMA who have, backgrounds similar that are still fighting. They're still fighting. We talk about Anthony Johnson and these types of guys who are fighting, and they don't get nearly the same scrutiny that a guy like he does. So I feel like it's about what I expected, I guess, like that once it was out there and he was going to be doing it, that he was going to catch a lot of hell, probably from both sides. But maybe it's gone a little bit, I don't know, maybe it's gone a little bit crazier than I thought right away. We don't even know if he'll ever even be able to compete. But
does this reflect poorly on the sport? Someone with his background says, I want to get into cage fighting. Like, this is the perfect fit for me.
Well, just his presence reflects poorly on the sport, of course. I mean, he's a scum. But here's the thing, there are people, as Chuck points out, there are a lot of people who fight in MMA or have fought in MMA who have had similar domestic violence circumstances in their lives. People who are active UFC fighters, prominent UFC fighters, right? So this it's not like this guy is something different, but he's comes from the more mainstream sports world. So obviously he's a bigger star, bigger name than any of them. And so I don't welcome him into the sport. I think that he's scum. However, the reaction, that like Jay Glazer and of Fox, give me a break. I mean, Jay Glazer's.
Tell people what he said.
He basically said that he doesn't think any MMA coaches or gyms should embrace this guy. They should shun him. Because it's such a privilege to fight in this sport. Give me a break, Jay. If you were so much in love with the beauty of and the art of martial arts, then you would be speaking out against all these other people. Anthony Johnson, etc. I mean, I never heard a word from Jay Glazer about any of these people. All of a sudden, Hardy comes out there and he becomes like, he grows a little bit of a halo over his head and starts talking about how this guy is the devil. Well, he is the devil, but he's not the only devil.
I also don't recall, I could be wrong about this, I don't recall Jay Glazer making headlines for being super anti-Mayweather either. Yeah. I mean, maybe he is, but it certainly didn't make this kind of rounds.
As someone who covers the sport for a living, do you have an issue with a notable NFL reporter who sometimes, is on UFC broadcast as a host, sort of speaking out and saying that, coaches, promoters, you should not give this guy an opportunity when, let's be honest, the NFL is filled with people with criminal past.
Crooks.
MMA is filled with people, all walks of life.
I don't care, it's his opinion.
Okay.
I mean, it's fine. It doesn't
you weren't bothered that this became such a big story?
Other than to the extent that it's intellectually consistent with everything else going on in the UFC, no, I don't mind that a guy of his position states his opinion. And frankly, I don't even know that I necessarily disagree. I'll just be honest about this one. I'm confused. I don't really know what the right answer is. On the one hand, someone saying this guy should never get a chance to fight MMA because he's done terrible things, and you should see the pictures that Deadspin put up of the alleged, or the victim here in this particular case. They're not pretty, and I can understand a corporation being like, we're not touching this guy with a 10-foot pole. On the other hand, I understand the people who say, look, number one, Anthony Johnson has had multiple women accuse him, including one in 2009 who said 2 of her teeth were knocked out. Abel Trujillo has a long record. Cody East, I mean, where do you even begin? Child abuse, rape, all kinds of stuff that he's had run-ins with the law, and you can go on and on from there. Travis Brown, including Ronda Rousey. So if we're not going to do anything to them, how is his case, which is, by the way, in many cases, not even as bad as some of the ones of the guys in the UFC. If we're not going to prevent them, how on earth can we prevent this guy? definitely his celebrity helps him. Because there's no doubt that there's going to be a market for a villain. MMA fans, combat sports fans generally, they will take guys, or women, or whatever. They will accept. They're interested in celebrity even in the form of villainy. But there might be one case to say that the fact that he is trying to enter the sport with pre-existing baggage as a celebrity, we'll see how much that hurts him. It could hurt him a lot. Maybe it doesn't hurt him at all. But it's interesting to keep in mind.
One interesting thing that was brought up many times when all the sports talk shows were talking about this were like the phrasing was interesting. Should he be allowed to fight in the octagon? Not recognizing that the octagon is just essentially in one place. I know RFA licensed it, but they're talking about the UFC. And then they're asking Dana White, would you sign him? Of course, there are many different promotions out there. So if a Scott Coker signs Greg Hardy, and let's be clear here. I mean, all bets are off in 2016. I sat on this show and said I had no problem with the CM Punk thing. And ultimately, would I go in a corner and cry if the UFC signs Greg Hardy? No. But let's not pretend like this thing can't happen and won't happen, because it does happen, and it will continue to happen, as I think we said on this show. It happened in Pride, and it happened in 2016, and it will continue to happen. So if a Scott Coker signs Greg Hardy, do you understand it? Does it make sense for a Bellator?
I mean, I don't know why we always have to kind of like put this asterisk on the sky.
Well, you brought it up. That's what I'm asking.
This is the kind of thing that they go in for a lot of times, a little bit of a polarizing signing like that. That's what they've traditionally done. So it's like, could I see it? Yeah, I could see that. I could see that, something like that happening, because of what you said. He is a celebrity, and regardless if you like the narrative or not, I don't know about like second chances. This would be like second chance in the traditional sense. Like a guy loses, he overcomes something, he's going to second chance. This is a second chance that he might be able to have in a different place, and you have to let a person's life play out. You can't just banish them from the world, or put, I guess you can put him in jail, but he's not in jail. He's not, this is where we're at with his life. So, yes, I could see somebody like that sign him. I don't know. I mean, to me, he's always going to be that guy, but you're right. It's a double standard. I would have to look at all the people who've had these, all the people who went through this. I'd have to look at them all that way. And do I do that? No, I don't. I don't look at Anthony Johnson every single time and think like, this guy is domestic abuse. He has all these people. A lot of times I just look at him as a contender for the, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's a double standard. I'm going to have to evaluate that as you go along.
Yeah, very few of us watch fights dispassionately. Most people watch a fight and they're rooting for somebody to get their ass kicked, right? They want to see one guy lose. They want to see one guy win. They want to see one guy lose.
I saw Max Kellerman basically like, let him fight in the cage because that's his come up.
So this is like a perfect. He becomes a perfect villain. I mean, I don't like it. I think it's dirty, but he becomes a perfect villain for people to you want to put him into the UFC. Yeah, put him in there with Cain Velasquez. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. It's a very simple question. Is there a market today? And I know he's not ready today. Let's say 2017, right? Was your report? Is there a market in 2017 for people to want to watch Greg Hardy get viciously KO'd? Yes, there is. And are you going to tell me that some promoter is not going to touch that because of some ethical concerns? Nonsense. And here's the scary part. What if he gets good? What if Greg Hardy turns out to be really, really good at this?
Yeah.
You really mean to tell me Scott Coker and Dana White are just going to sit there and go, you know what? We just can't cross that line. An elite heavyweight who actually turns out to be good, who has this baggage, I just don't buy it.
You know what was amazing to me yesterday on, I think, Speak for Yourself? Dana White sat there in front of Jason Whitlock, who I respect greatly, and said, I can't just say after a couple weeks of training that I want to play for the Patriots. And I was like, okay, now he's going to ask about CM Punk, right? I mean, you literally just did this 30 days ago. You literally just did this 30 days ago.
I didn't see that.
Oh my, it was unbelievable. And again, I said I was fine with it, but you can't use that excuse anymore. That's done.
Okay, I'll defend CM Punk a little bit here, shockingly. There is a little bit different. Greg Hardy, they might have given Greg Hardy a shot in a different world, but CM Punk partly got that jump right to the top, however much I was against it, because he's a good guy, right? Everyone was rooting for his story. Greg Hardy has to be like, he has to prove that, number one, please don't go to jail for cocaine. Number two, just stop hitting women. And number three, live above board. Live within the law long enough for us to say you are stable enough for some kind of investment.
Yeah, but I hate to. God, I'm not going to defend Greg Hardy here, but he's more of an athlete than CM Punk was, right? I mean, he's an elite. Division. He's an elite athlete in the prime of his life. CM Punk is an older guy who was never a real athlete. Never, he was a gymnast.
athlete.
Well, he was
Right.
he was an actor, gymnast, wrestler.
I think you could call him an athlete. He's doing athletic endeavors. This is a different discussion
Well-
for a different day. My point is, you can no longer say the thing like, oh, we're the big leagues, we don't sign these kind of fighters, because they do sign these kind of fighters. In fact, they did it 30 days ago. The one thing that I took real umbrage with, look, when I first heard the news, I was like, gosh, the reaction to this is just, I mean, it's like,
Were you surprised when you heard it?
well, no, I wasn't surprised, but I was like, man, it's gonna be, MMA is gonna be the butt of a joke, and
Did you
people
see
are
the
gonna
New York
talk-
Daily News headline?
I
Or
did
maybe it was
not.
the Post. Greg Hardy gives up violent career for more violent career.
Yeah, it's not a good look for MMA. It's unfortunate, but to me, I take umbrage with this idea that he shouldn't be afforded the opportunity to go into a cage, go into a gym, have a contract with a promoter. I mean, would we be saying the same thing? Let's say Greg Hardy had this epiphany and wanted to become a professor at NYU. Should he not be afforded that? Like, why is
You don't,
MMA?
you don't need a government license to do that.
My point is, like, MMA is not some kind of priesthood. It's not some sort of sainthood. So let's stop pretending
and that's
that you need
really
to be
the-
like some exemplary human being by doing this
And
sport.
that's where the Jay Glazer thing is a little bit peeving, because it's not that he's speaking on behalf of MMA. It's that he's speaking something that's just not true. That's not true. It's not true that this is like,
Right.
there's this ultimate respect that goes into the sport and all this. That's just not true. That's, some people want to talk like that and want to believe it, but it's a
And
delusion.
some people try to live that way.
And some people do try to live that way, but that's what makes the sport a whole. It's like there's so many different.
And by the way, he could go
facets to
fight
it.
in Japan. He doesn't need any government
That's true.
licensure. So.
I mean here. Yeah.
But I don't like this idea of pinning this thing like it's some great privilege to do MMA. Look, at the end of the day, the guy, we don't know what the guy's doing on a day-to-day basis right now. We don't know what anyone's doing on a day-to-day basis. Who are we to say that you can't do this or that? Like, who gave us?
You can just have an opinion. That's all you can have.
The debate would be more complicated if he was like, so for example, like to what extent, there's a debate going on in Virginia, to what extent do you extend voting rights to former felons, right? It's a big debate. But, and I hate to say this, he doesn't have a record. The charges against him were expunged.
Yeah.
What government agency can say you can't get a license if he's healthy and fills the bare minimums of requirements? It's an unfortunate reality depending on your perspective, but it's the one we live in.
And there's also the argument against him is, one of the arguments against him is, well, he's already shown to be a violent guy, and now he wants to train to learn, to inflict more violence. But there's the other side of that would be, there are people who have used martial arts to find the peace in their
Channel that
world.
violence, right?
And I'm not suggesting that that's where he's going to go with it, but that does exist. There is some precedent for that happening, where people who've had troubled lives have taken to martial arts and found a way to channel it, channel their energies in a more positive or at least focused way.
Yeah, I'll just say this: in
I
a
think he did
year,
it because he needs a paycheck.
possible
irrelevance,
as well. I think he made $8 million last year, but in a year where we saw at the beginning of the year Data 5000, debut for Bellator, CM Punk debut for the UFC, nothing surprises me. Nothing should surprise you anymore in this sport, regardless of who signs him. One last thing before we go: we've never actually done this on the show, but I find this fight so fascinating that 5 days later I'm still thinking about it a lot. I just want to know how you guys scored the main event of UFC 204, because I think that this is, I love using this term like barbershop fight, where you could sit around with friends in 10 years and you can all have very, very credible arguments and takes as to why you're right about your scorecard, and we can all have different ones. I think it's such an interesting fight to score. So I'm just curious, how did you score it and why?
Couldn't agree with you more. I spent 10 minutes on my podcast yesterday. I think this fight needs to be examined by people who want to judge anywhere because of how difficult it is to properly apply the scoring criteria. Upon initial viewing live blogging, which I tell everyone is like texting and driving, you miss things, I had it 47-47, a draw. Upon reviewing it for the Monday Morning Analyst, I rescored it. I had it 49-46 Bisping. But I can allow.
Okay, but tell me the rounds, and also, is that fair to do that? Because
No, I just mean, okay, neither scorecard's correct for me because in either one it's an inauthentic experience. But for the first one, for the 47-47, I had it 10-8 to Hendo, 10-9 Bisping, 10-9 Bisping, 10-9 Bisping, 10-9 Hendo. Okay, rounds 1, rounds 5, 10-8, 10-9. So that'd be the draw. The second time around, and I struggle with this, I really, really struggle with this, 10-9 Hendo, Bisping all the rest of the way down. But don't think I wasn't thinking in the second and fifth round which way to go.
fascinating. How about you?
Well, I had it 3-2 for Bisping.
Which rounds?
But I had the first two.
You can't
for
just
Hendo.
give me 3-2
I had
because
the
you
first
can.
2 for Hendo, and then I had the rest for Bisping.
And did you give the first round a 10-8?
See, that was the thing. Like you were saying, you're busy doing your stuff on fight night, and to my naked eye, I was like, I know he got dropped and all that, but this is always such a gray area, and I had it as a 10-9. But if somebody said that's a 10-8, I wouldn't have disagreed either. You know what I mean?
Okay, this is the only one I will debate with people. It's not a 10-8. It's just not a 10-8. If you look at the criteria for 10-8,
Sure.
damage, domination, and duration, he is only on the ground from second 39.
Yeah.
He is firing back on his feet
It's the
by
duration.
second 15.
It's the duration.
It doesn't satisfy the requirements.
Yeah, it was 20 seconds. That was my. I didn't even think about 10-8 right off the bat watching it live. Then I started seeing on Twitter people like, oh, why was it not a 10-8? So I watched it again and I counted it. And somehow in my mind, before I rewatched it, I was thinking, geez, he must have knocked him down with about a minute to go and beat the crap out of him for the last minute. Well, no, it was 39 seconds, and then he was back up 20 seconds later. And yeah, he got clocked, and he took some shots on the ground, but he got up and Bisping got up, and when he went back to his corner, you could tell he was shaken, because he said I'm all right, but then he said, what did he hit me with? So he wasn't really all right, but he wasn't as bad off as he was at the end of the round with Anderson Silva.
Sure.
Right. So
what did you
I
score?
also had it 3 rounds to 2 for.
So first round?
I basically scored it the way most of the majority of the judges had it. I thought first round it was 10-9, all 10-9s all the way through.
Yeah.
And I guess, was it Hendo?
Hendo, first round.
Hendo, Bisping, I think was what
Some
it was.
people gave Hendo the fifth, which I don't think is.
Because of the takedown.
The problem is he didn't do a whole. I mean, look,
Sure,
the
but
takedown counts.
not a lot happened in that round.
I think if you go back and you look at some of the striking, it's a little bit more in Bisping's favor, but
Okay.
it's close. Here's the one thing I think is really interesting. Under the current criteria, the one that's about to be in place in 2017, it does not satisfy the requirements for 10-8. The question is whether it should. In other words, what does a knockdown mean? I don't think in boxing, basically, if you get knocked down, automatic 10-8. I'm not suggesting that, but geez, man, when Bisping got up, he not only had a mouse, the mouse was bleeding, he didn't know what he got hit with. He satisfied the requirements as they're written to not get a 10-8. But I really feel like we haven't figured out what it means when you rock someone's jaw like that, because I really feel like that should have been a 10-8, but I can't give it to him based on how it's written.
MMA is different from boxing. In boxing, it is a 10-9 or a 10-8. But in MMA, if he had been on the verge of being finished, 10-7, 10-6. I mean, they just don't use these other numbers. And clearly, Hendo won that round by a far greater margin than Bisping won any of his rounds. So to say that they're all 10-9s, which is the way I scored it, because that's the way we score things now, it's not really right. That's not. But it is within the way. It is within the current accepted standards of scoring. So I guess so I'm going by that. But in reality, yeah, that was a 10-8 round because it was worse than a 10-9 round. And but it wasn't. But that's only a 10-8 round if you can also allow me to give 10-7 rounds to a guy who's really on the verge of getting finished.
Well,
and
you could do it if you want.
You can, but I think that this is not. But I think that they have to. There should be some reshuffling of things just to allow a little greater.
Well, the reshuffling is that the whole 10-point must system doesn't work because it's a boxing model.
You can argue Hendo, rounds 1, rounds 2, rounds 5, and you'd be correct. And you can argue like me, 49-46 Bisping, and I think there's an argument for that. Literally under the exact same criteria you allow for completely different winners with completely different scores.
When I grow up one day, I'm going to open up my own barbershop, and we're going to have a bar there and stuff, and we're just going to play on loop like Diaz, Condit, this fight, Dillashaw, Cruz, and just sit around and score. And I bet every person sitting there can have a different take, and you can truly have the right take. I mean, who's to say?
That's true.
Again, you can argue first round 10-8. You can argue first round Hendo 10-9. You could even argue Bisping 10-9 in the first round. Who the heck knows? You can argue Hendo winning the second. You can argue Bisping winning the second.
And 10-10s.
But you know what?
And the fifth too. I think the only one we could agree on is the third and fourth, right? Everyone thinks Bisping won that
Not
one.
much controversy about those.
But you know what? Even though some, Hendo, very big Hendo fans are going to argue that he should have gone out as a winner. I look at it as Hendo won out as a winner. I mean, he performed on that night very admirably, and he went out as a winning fighter, as a guy who could hold his head up and walk away in a great way. Now if he had won the thing, it would have thrown the whole division
Sure.
into disarray, assuming he was going to still walk away like he ended up saying he was going to. And instead we got to see Bisping go back home and win a really tough fight. I mean, I feel like the result of the fight, while I agree with Luke that it could have gone either way, I was really happy with the way it came out in the end. I feel like everybody sort of got what they needed in the end.
Well, last week I spoke to that Monday, I spoke to Dan Hardy and Michael Johnson. Neither of them scored it like a judge would score it, but both of them walked away feeling that Henderson took the first, second, and fifth. And it just sort of tells you that, like, it's one thing if you go to a fight and just your average fan is like, oh man, he got robbed.
Yeah.
We're talking about two pro fighters and their general feel, which I understand is not how you score a fight, but I think it kind of says something if two guys with extensive combat sports experience feel like one guy clearly won, and by the way we score it, maybe not.
And it's never a robbery when 50% of the people are saying one thing, 50% are saying the other.
It wasn't controversial.
It's just one of those fights. I mean, it's just
debatable.
one of those fights, yeah.
It's a fact. I think you're totally right. What an interesting fight.
And I think your point is 100% spot on. In the grand scheme of things, when you take a step back from the actual minutia of the fight, this is what was best for the UFC, because this fight, as we talked about, much maligned, it didn't make sense. Hendo goes out a champion in the people's eyes, cheered, his name is being chanted.
That's the worst part of it, though.
No, well,
for me, because I think that the worst part, the UFC had no right making a title fight,
but they made
like this, and I think I was almost. I don't root for fighters, but I was almost rooting for Hendo just to spoil their broth.
Look, you don't want a vacated title. Bisping retains.
But they created that. They created that scenario.
Sure. But in a weird way, they didn't script it. But I feel like if they could have scripted it, it's because you don't want to book a fight where the new champion, walks away with the belt, and now you're left with a vacated title. It's just kind of a mess. So I really feel like it was the perfect scenario because both guys kind of left looking like champions in their own right. Anyhow, we're done. Great stuff, guys. A lot of fun. Back next week. Here's the good news for those who wanted a little bit of a break. There isn't a show this weekend as far as the UFC is concerned. Of course, they were supposed to have this show in Manila. It has been, quote unquote, rescheduled.
Derek Lewis, he's still out there?
Poor Derek Lewis. Making America trill again. It has been rescheduled. That's their words. But what you really need to know is there is no UFC show this weekend, next weekend, and the following weekend, 15th, 22nd, 29th. It's been a long time since we've had a break quite like this. So fire up that Fight Pass and just go wild.
I'm going to destroy my internal organs with alcohol.
But we'll be back next week. So that's the good news.
Before we go, we haven't talked about this. Are we going to do a beat the week of UFC 205?
Do we have to talk about this on the air?
Yeah, why not?
I feel like these are the kind of things that we talk about internally.
We're like the Nevada Commission, just like making it up as we go along.
What a way to end the show. Talking about something happening in a month.
I'm sorry for hyping up a big show, my bad.
We'll ask the people, do they want to beat that week? Live from MSG, center court, over the Knicks logo.
SB Nation, pay for it.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for that. For now, we'll say goodbye. For Luke, Chuck, Jeff, I'm Ariel again. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy your weekend.